I've experienced racism, but nothing like this.
Tonight, an Alberta family gets an anonymous letter telling their children to go back to the reserve.
There are days that I wish I could just go back to my normal living, right? And not knowing, knowing that it's not possible at this time, it does get pretty heartbreaking.
Displaced. A British Columbia community evacuated because of wildfires waits to go home.
It is a testament to our resilience and an important symbol of reconciliation.
And a monument to honor the survivors of residential schools is unveiled in the Yukon. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. An Alberta family thought they lived in a neighborhood where their kids could play, but then their children came home to find an angry, racist letter in their mailbox. Now the children are afraid to play in their own front yard, but as John Murray reports, many in the community of St. Albert are determined to change that.
This cul-de-sac is off a roadway in a quiet townhome community, a mix of rentals and condos. The nearest major road is blocked by a fence, a place many parents would consider ideal and safe for their children. The Anderson children played here until last Monday afternoon. The kids came home and found this letter in their mailbox. The letter said, "Move out or things will escalate. Would not want to see the kids getting hurt. This isn't a reserve. Go back to the reserve where Indians belong."
I've experienced racism, but nothing like this. Like this isn't happening on the playground. It's not happening out in public. This is in our mailbox. This is our house, And my daughter, she wants to move.
When Anderson shared the letter on Facebook, support started pouring in, including the city's mayor.
Your first reaction is horror, and this is a black hell out over St. Albert. Read all the responses. They're all supportive.
Even a local business owner stepped up and is organizing a community gathering.
And I think that's why I wanted to do this, because St. Albert is a loving community. I was born and raised here, and it was really important for me to show not only the family, but the entire community what kind of support is here in St. Albert.
However, the Andersons are still determined to move.
The kids can't be here. That's the bottom line.
So it seems no one knows who wrote the letter. What we do know is the Andersons are moving, and their kids are afraid. As for the neighbors and the greater St. Albert community, they've stepped up in numerous ways, and many plan to gather on Sunday, October 28th, in a show of solidarity, support, and celebration. John Murray, APTN National News, St. Albert.
The life and death of Circling Star has been chronicled in a report released in Manitoba. Circling Star died just before his 18th birthday. He had been drinking before losing control of the vehicle he was driving. His life was filled with contact with child and family services, mental health workers, and addictions counselors. Child advocate Daphne Penrose says the system failed. She outlines 6 recommendations in her report.
As part of the investigation, my team reviewed and analyzed the services provided to him by education, mental health, addictions, youth justice, and child and family services. While there were good intentions from some service providers and some developed lasting and meaningful connections with him, those services did not provide the interventions Circling Star needed, and those public systems missed countless opportunities to help him change the course of his life.
Funding has been announced to help First Nations children living off reserve in Manitoba access dental and health services. The nearly $1.2 million is to support Jordan's Principle. Jordan's Principle is named in memory of Jordan River Anderson. Jordan spent years in the hospital while the province of Manitoba and the federal government argued over who should pay for his care at home. He died in hospital at the age of 5. Despite unanimous support for Jordan's Principle in Ottawa, the program has been ineffective due to a lack of funding.
The federal government has stopped fighting with the province. We've just started approving the requests, and then because the idea is to actually make sure that the services are there. and not figure out about jurisdictional wrangling with the province to figure out who's actually supposed to pay for these services. Now the federal government, we have to go back to the provinces and say, well, these are the services we provided. We believe they're under your jurisdiction, but the idea is not to make people suffer.
Federal government wants to change how resource projects are assessed and approved. It's called Bill C-69. The Indian Resource Council represents First Nations involved in the oil and gas industry. Its president, Stephen Buffalo, says the proposed legislation will harm their economic development. The Conservatives brought up his concerns today in question period.
The majority of First Nations do support responsible resource development for the benefit of all Canadians, and it's key to poverty reduction and to Canada's high standard of living. The reality is investment, though, is fleeing Canada under these Liberals. And here's what Stephen Buffalo also says, quote, Indigenous communities are on the verge of a major economic breakthrough, one that finally allows Indigenous people to share in Canada's economic prosperity. Bill C-69 will stop this progress in its tracks. So when will the Liberals kill their No More Pipelines Bill C-69?
Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
It's always heartening to hear that the party opposite cares about Indigenous peoples and Indigenous rights after they did nothing for a decade. We are pleased that we have been working with Indigenous peoples. Let me explain to the party opposite how we're working with Indigenous peoples. There will be early engagement with Indigenous peoples, that we will actually be sitting down with Indigenous peoples, not dumping big documents about projects on their desks. We're going to have a consultation plan so that we can listen to them and we can figure out how we move forward together. I agree, there are huge economic opportunities for Indigenous peoples. We need to make sure they benefit. They didn't under the previous.
At a ceremony on the bank of the Yukon River, a monument was unveiled to honor the survivors of the Indian Mission School in Whitehorse. This is the first ever erected acknowledgement of the school there. Luke Smith has more.
This monument is about remembering and sharing and talking about our memories, whether they're good or bad. It is a testament to our resilience and an important symbol of reconciliation.
By the efforts of the Whitehorse Aboriginal Women's Circle and partial funding from the Anglican Healing Fund, this monument pays recognition to the survivors and their intergenerational families of the Indian Mission School, run by the Baptist Church from 1947 to 1960. Adeline Weber is a survivor of the school. She was just 5 years old when she was taken. There, she was not allowed to honor her traditions, practice her culture, nor speak her language for the next 7 years.
We wanted to create an open space where we could move more freely, think freely, and find our voices.
Ken Anderson, a Tlingit First Nation artist, carved the 9 seats from Yukon burled wood. He says it's an interactive piece, and the seats represent the 9 languages that would have been spoken by its students.
It's about encouraging understanding and providing an opportunity for education, for people to learn about what happened, and you know, also provide, you know, the opportunity for some empathy and trying to understand where people are at and maybe where they're coming from.
Job well done.
Good.
Yeah.
You're part of it too, so.
People who attended the event were treated to a special gift, a second book of Finding Our Faces. The books are a collection of the photos of the mission school students.
Oh, you're welcome. Most of us don't have any photographs of ourselves or our siblings. When we were in the residential school, there was no photo albums that you can look back on.
Project coordinator Melissa Carlick says there is more work to do.
It's not finished. There still needs to be a plaque put on and with a story or some words to bring more of a story to it, but also it'll raise questions and people start asking, and it'll start the dialogue.
The monument will now be maintained and looked after by the Tourism and Culture branch of the territorial government.
To come down and sit down in the circle and have a conversation, have a cup of tea, and think about what you can do to build better communities, healthier communities.
Luke Smith, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll take you back to Telegraph Creek. a community in BC that is still evacuated following the summer's wildfires. Here's a look at Saturday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 15 and rain for Halifax, 14 with showers for Charlottetown. -1 and a rain-snow mix in Nain. Rain-snow mix and +4 for Happy Valley Goose Bay. Rain and 12 in Montreal. 9 with rain in Quebec City and Saguenay. 10 and rain in Toronto and Peterborough. In Thunder Bay, +1 with snow and rain. 0 in Sioux Lookout with that same rain-snow mix. -6 for Churchill, snow and 0 for Puckatawagan, snow and -2 in God's Lake. +2 and sunny for Winnipeg and Gimli, 4 above under the sun in Brandon. 9 above for Regina and Estevan, 14 and sunny skies for Swift Current. 5 above but with snow for Uranium City, rain-snow mix in 3 in Stony Rapids. Welcome back. The fentanyl overdose is continuing to be at an all-time high in BC. The war on drugs has a new weapon. As APTN's Tina House reports, the new strategy, it will hopefully help drug users from overdosing.
It's more than enough, and you get it back after. So.
Here at the Overdose Prevention Society, anyone off the street can come in and get their drugs checked for free to see if they are contaminated, with the biggest worry of fentanyl or carfentanil.
The measurement itself takes about 2 minutes.
This is one of 3 spectrometer machines Vancouver Coastal Health has invested into. They are being rotated around safe injection sites and organizations in Vancouver. It works with an infrared light that shines a light onto a small crystal, and all the components in the drug will show up on this laptop.
What I did there was I subtracted the signal from crystal meth, and what I'm left with is essentially a straight line at the bottom, meaning that this was probably pure crystal meth.
In addition to that, a small test strip called a fentanyl dipstick is used to confirm that there is no fentanyl. A small amount of the drug is put into a separate cup with 1 ounce of water.
So these are the fentanyl dipsticks, the BTNX. What they are is essentially a immunoassay, and they have antibodies on here that will bind to fentanyl analogs and cause a red strip to appear.
This particular test is negative for fentanyl because it only has 2 lines. But if it had 1 line, it would be positive. Coco Culbertson has been working on the front lines for over 18 years.
We see about a 25% reduction in overdose with people that have tested their drugs, which is a really big number when you think of all the injections that are happening in this community every day.
Daniel Metlisky has been using heroin since he was 15. He says that the spectrometer machine has helped save lives. Did you ever find fentanyl in any of your batch?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty much everywhere. There is no heroin anymore.
Only 1% of either fentanyl or carfentanil in street drugs can kill you. These test strips are available for purchase at most dollar stores and may just save more lives. The provincial government has invested $3 million into this program. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Civic elections for Vancouver's mayor and city council take place this weekend. And Musqueam Nation member Wade Grant is running for city councillor, making him the only Indigenous candidate in the race. He's a former councillor for his band and has served as an advisor for the office of the premier. He says if elected, he wants to tackle the housing situation and drug crisis currently happening in Vancouver.
Having an Indigenous voice at the table is something that is long overdue. A lens that has never been there before. We have people sitting at that table that are negotiating with our communities, but we've never had somebody that's actually been a part of that community. I think that's how we can really create a healing for the city and move forward.
In early August, a massive wildfire burned through Telegraph Creek in British Columbia. The entire community has been under evacuation for over 2 months, and it looks like it will be another 2 months until they can finally move back home. APTN's Lori Hamlin has their story.
Telegraph Creek is a remote town in northern BC, situated along the Stikine River. It's home to 200 members of Tahltan First Nation, who are all still under evacuation.
Good afternoon, People's Haven.
We met with a handful of evacuees gathered at People's Haven in Dease Lake, a small community just over 100 kilometers from Telegraph. Looking around at all the happy faces makes it hard to imagine that their community was devastated by a wildfire. Darla Craig's home was completely destroyed.
It is hard, but we adapt.
Lightning was the cause of the wildfire. High winds and extremely dry conditions were the perfect storm. What started out as one wildfire quickly merged with others, creating a wall of fire that burned everything in its path. 21 homes in total burned to the ground, scattering evacuees all across BC and up to the Yukon.
That's the worst thing, is that we're all spread out all over.
Darla and her family are living with her brother in Dease Lake. She says keeping connected to her community is what keeps her going.
There are days that I wish I could just go back to my normal living, right? And not knowing, knowing that it's not possible at this time. It does get pretty heartbreaking. The majority of it is everybody just wants to get back to regular, to normal.
But even though the fire is now out, returning to normal back at home can't just happen right away. At the Tahltan Emergency Operations Center, set up in Dease Lake, Chief Rick McLean explains that the cleanup is not that simple.
We're still in a response. We're not into recovery yet. First little while, once we were into out of fire danger, all these assessments had to be done. Slope assessments, water, insurance folks had to come in and they had to look at everything. So all this took like weeks.
The chief's goal is to have his entire community living back in Telegraph by mid-December. The estimated cost of recovery and rebuild is more than $10 million.
Winter's on us, and you can't really build in the winter here, so in the meantime, we purchased these mobile homes. We're going to set them up in Telegraph, create a new subdivision there across from the band office, and put people into those until we can do a rebuild discussion and planning session.
Alice Hamlin also lost her home in the fire. She's living at the Terrace Comfort Inn while waiting to move to one of the new mobile homes.
It is what it is, and we have to live with it. And yes, I do get frustrated sometimes, but it's something I just let it go. And they're putting the modulars in there now and whatnot, and I'm looking forward to staying in one of those. The old is over now. It's a new beginning. We get new stuff, new home. So I know that we're all going to be okay. I know that.
Lori Hamlin, APTN National News, Telegraph Creek.
A new episode of APTN Investigates airs tonight right after the news. We'll speak with the reporter of Dark Valley after the break. Here's the rest of Saturday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Sunny and 12 above for Grand Prairie and Peace River. 16 above in Medicine Hat. 19 and sunny for Lethbridge. Smoky and 15 in Tofino, Vancouver and Campbell River. Sunny and 12 for Fort Nelson and Prince George. Rain and 6 in Dease Lake. Sunny and 7 for Beaver Creek and Whitehorse, plus 5 and sunny skies in Watson Lake. 12 above for Fort Liard and Trout Lake. 10 in Fort Simpson under sunny skies. Snow and minus 12 for Sax Harbor. Minus 1 with snow for Colville Lake. Minus 8 in Arviette. Sunny and minus 14 for Repulse Bay. Minus 11 in snow for Clyde River. Minus 13 in Arctic Bay. Welcome back. APTN Investigates is continuing their 10th season with Dark Valley. This summer, Holly Moore and Rob Smith traveled to the heart of the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, looking into the disappearances of 5 women in the area. Holly is here to talk about the episode. Holly, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about what drew your attention to these cases?
So I was here back in Winnipeg, and I was watching the TV around the 5 women who had gone missing and the big search that was done exactly a year ago, essentially, on the Sagmoyan farm. And I thought, what is going on here? 5 women in a 75-kilometer radius, an hour's drive in a rural part of BC. So I felt really compelled to just get out and get on the ground there.
What can you tell us about this drone search team that you worked with?
So this is a group of women, essentially grandmothers, who all got together and decided to do ground searches, looking for clues, evidence. They do a lot of research. They brought in the drones because one of the members of their ground search team had gotten injured. And so they thought the drones would be useful for looking over this really, beautiful mountainous landscape. Dangerous, though. So they're this, the best way to describe them is relentless. They're just relentless researchers, and everything they're finding, they're passing on to the RCMP.
And so why are they relentless? What makes them do these searches?
One of them expressed Jody Leon, who is essentially the leader of this group. She's part of the Splatine Nation, and she expressed that these women, all of them, were guests in the territory, and therefore she's really compelled. She has a duty to go and look for them. Yeah.
What can you tell us that's currently underway with these cases?
Well, right now the RCMP is not saying much. They're not telling the drone team if their work is helping. They refused an interview with us. One of the people who is actually not connected to the missing women but is connected to alleged assaults of sex workers in the area, Curtis Sagmoyan, he's currently in custody, facing 12 charges, including disguising his face, firearms, substance abuse charges, or a substance abuse offense. He is actually going to trial in the next little bit, and again, RCMP have not connected him to these women, but that's what's currently happening.
I understand you had some strange encounters. Would you mind telling us a bit about those?
So I've been an investigative journalist for a long time. This is probably the first time where I, put my chair up against the hotel doorknob at the end of a shoot day. We were really clearly not welcome in a certain area around Enderby, BC. The drone search team has also felt this intimidation. Wendy Moore, who's one of the team members, doesn't go out alone anymore. We had a person come down a road and actually blocked our vehicle and stopped and asked us questions, even though we're on a public road. We had motorcycles stop us. We had, and it was beyond the usual curiosity.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Holly, it looks like a great episode. Appreciate you taking some time to tell us about it here today.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
And Dark Valley airs in just a few minutes from now. That is your APTN National News for this Friday. Tune in tomorrow for APTN National News Weekend. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night.